summer of 1943 had nothing heroic about it. The Mediterranean sun did not warm. It crushed. Light struck the water and bounced back so hard it felt like it erased shadows, erased cover, as if the war itself could see you more clearly. And behind the images the newspapers loved, ships, flags, long columns moving forward, there was a truth no one liked to say out loud. The Allies were arriving. But they were spending men to do it. In Berlin, no one believed in a beautiful ending anymore. The German High Command was no longer expecting to turn the tide like in the early years. They wanted something else, something cheaper and crueler. They wanted the Allies to lose momentum, because an army can win battles. But when it loses the ability to move, it begins to die from the inside. And that is why, at this stage of the war, the most dangerous weapon was not a bullet. It was a cut. Germany aimed at something that decides wars without applause. A port. The public sees tanks, but war is decided by fuel, ammunition, food, medicine, spare parts. And all of it must arrive every single day, or the result is hunger, delay, and slow defeat. The name of that port was Antwerp. And if Antwerp stopped, the advance stopped with it. But while Germany prepared to cut the vein, something strange began happening on the German side. Reports started coming in, not with panic, but with confusion. The kind of confusion that angers trained men. It wasn't, "We were crushed." It was, "They weren't here, and now they are." Patrols spotted movement in one sector, called for support, only to discover minutes later that the threat was already somewhere else. Units advanced, believing a route was clear, and suddenly took fire from a flank that should not have existed. And then came the sentence that started as a complaint and turned into fear. The enemy was everywhere at once. It wasn't Patton, not the showman, not the headline general. It was a man who at first glance looked like the opposite of danger. No theatrics, no famous speeches, no loud energy the public associates with military genius. Reserved, precise, almost dry, Lucian Truscott. And here was the German mistake. They looked at him the way they looked at the rest, as just another man inside the American machine. But Truscott was not a machine. Truscott was method. And method, when applied well, looks like magic to those who never saw the training. When the Allies landed in Sicily, the Germans did not panic. To them, it was still peripheral. A hot island, rough ground, mixed forces, tired from the landing. Nothing there looked decisive. But that was where the pattern began. German units reported contact with Americans, fell back to secondary positions, and discovered hours later those positions were already compromised. There was no classic encirclement, no straight-line advance. There was rapid lateral movement, infiltration, reappearance. And that broke the first German mental pillar. The enemy can only be in one place at a time. The Germans knew the American style. Heavy, loud, dependent on massive artillery. But the units under Truscott did not behave that way. They moved too light for standard infantry, too quiet for freshly landed troops, too coordinated for improvisation. A German commander described the feeling without realizing the error. We cannot predict where they will apply pressure. And when you cannot predict, you begin reacting late. The confusion did not come from major defeats. It came from constant small losses. A road taken earlier than expected, a hill occupied without prolonged fighting, a patrol that vanished and reappeared behind the line. That does not just destroy positions. It destroys operational confidence, because the German General Staff was trained to read maps like equations, and the equations stopped balancing. At first, the Germans rationalized luck, isolated error, overcaution at the front. Anything except admitting the most dangerous truth. There was a system at work, Because admitting a system means admitting adaptation. And admitting adaptation means admitting the enemy learned something you did not teach him. In Italy, the war was not open. It was narrow, mountainous, made of choke points, valleys, roads with no second chance. There, victory does not belong to the side with more men. It belongs to the side that arrives first at the right point. And that is where Truscott showed that his obsession was not style, it was survival. Truscott did not always seek frontal contact. He sought constant displacement. While the enemy tried to identify the main pressure point, another unit was already flanking. While one German commander reorganized a sector, another sector was already under pressure. The result was a specific feeling, repeated again and again. We don't know where to concentrate force, and that is the beginning of defeat. Before official reports, something more honest appeared, the diffuse fear among the troops. Soldiers reported that the Americans disappeared, that contact ceased and returned unexpectedly, not as a massive assault, but as presence, and constant presence exhausts more than direct attack. That sentence began appearing in interrogations. They were here yesterday. We thought they had pulled back. We don't know when they passed through. This does not frighten because of violence. It frightens because of uncertainty. Because you are not only fighting men, you are fighting something you cannot locate. At some point, reports stop being isolated. They begin to sound alike. Same words, same frustration, same phrase repeated with variations. The enemy appears everywhere at once, and then comes the institutional shock. This is not coincidence. It is method. It was not blind speed. It was controlled rhythm. Long marches, but sustainable. Units trained to change direction without collapse. Officers prepared to decide without endless orders. That allowed something the enemy could not replicate: continuous adaptation. While the Germans planned, Truscott was already executing the next phase. The German mistake was not only tactical, it was psychological. They never saw Truscott as a central threat, never treated him like Patton, never focused on him early enough, and when they realized, they were already reacting to his movement, never imposing. To a German general, the map is truth. Lines define safety. Sectors define control. Distance defines time. But against Truscott, maps began to fail emotionally. Positions marked secure made contact. Quiet sectors requested reinforcements. Secondary axes became critical without warning, not because the Americans had more troops, but because they arrived before German reasoning, and that creates a silent collapse. When the map no longer matches reality, command enters doubt. The Germans knew how to recognize a siege. Truscott did not encircle. He did something worse. He created a constant sense of lateral threat. You never knew if you were being watched, never knew if that road was still yours, never knew if silence meant emptiness or preparation. That forces the enemy to spread forces, to defend everything. And when you defend everything, you control nothing. It was not battle that destroyed the Germans. It was cognitive fatigue, making decisions without certainty, moving troops without clarity, withdrawing without knowing where pressure truly came from. It doesn't show up in statistics, but it shows up in behavior. More cautious officers, slower orders, excessive defensive reactions, and every delay was exactly what Truscott needed. That was the fatal error. He did not shout like Patton. He did not perform. He did not cultivate public myth. To German high command, that mattered. They looked for loud personalities, men who announced themselves. Truscott did the opposite. He let movement speak. In later reports, the tone changed. Less arrogance, more frustration, no insults, only implicit admission. We cannot fix the enemy's main effort. That sentence is devastating because it means the enemy controls tempo, and whoever controls tempo controls outcome. At first, the Germans asked, "Where are they coming from?" Later, the question became, "Where are they not?" That mental shift is the real defeat, because now the enemy no longer reacts to terrain. He reacts to fear of error. That sentence was not praise. It was a confession of helplessness. It appears in reports, interrogations, post-war memoirs. Not because Truscott had supernatural gifts, but because he built something the enemy could not neutralize: mental mobility plus physical mobility. Truscott was not fast all the time. He moved outside pattern. And that destroys rigid doctrine. When the enemy cannot understand your rhythm, every movement feels simultaneous. Truscott did not win through brute force, nor charisma. He won because he trained men to decide, taught units to shift without collapse, turned movement into language he did not need to be seen. He needed to be felt. Because history remembers those who shout, not those who dismantle the enemy in silence. But the Germans remembered. They were the first to understand. The most dangerous enemy is not the loudest. It is the one who arrives before your certainty.